one of the things that I've been thinking about for maybe 2 or 3 years now, it's how it seems like we're not necessarily in a housing bubble, but in an urban housing bubble. My brother lives in San Francisco. I have plenty of friends in DC and New York City. And I think DC is a lot cleaner. It's a lot more verdant. But I look at somewhere like San Francisco, people pay $2,000 for a studio, and that's considered a good price. And you go right outside their apartment, and there are tons of homeless people. The story that I like to acknowledge is I was walking in a very wealthy neighborhood, and a gentleman comes out of an alleyway, and this is 8 o'clock in the morning. People are on their way to work. Gentleman comes out of the alleyway, kind of stumbles around. All right, you know, a bit of a red flag. And then he just proceeds to vomit, like so much, a literal puddle onto the sidewalk. And people part, like it's the Red Sea, you know, they're walking around this guy. No one is looking at him, which to me is just a little bit grimy in my stomach that, all right, if a person is clearly this ill, give them the decency to at least acknowledge their existence. But in my head, I'm thinking, who's paying $2,000 for a studio in this city where these kind of events are frequent? Now we have introduced an event which urban density brings up certain cautions that may lag well after the threat is concluded. Do you think there's any potential for some kind of urban housing value collapse?
I think in the short term, that's definitely a risk. I think it's plausible that there could be something of an exodus, especially of older folks out of cities. But generally speaking, cities and on average, and especially DC, I can't speak to New York and San Francisco, but I know that demographically DC is a very, very young city compared to other major cities in the United States. And so I think it's plausible that we could see further exodus of older folks from DC, New York, and San Francisco to places out in the suburbs that are not necessarily more affordable, but just safer, safer from a public health perspective, and also perhaps maybe a bit higher quality of life, given the story that you told. In the long term, though, cities are going to remain, I think, a desirable place not only for individuals but for businesses to locate. And this coronavirus is not going to be the solution to our massive inflation in prices of housing and rental and owned housing. I don't think this is going to resolve that. Unfortunately, that's going to have to come from the policy level. And the coronavirus is not gonna solve that.
How are you doing, man?
On a personal level,
yeah,
I'm good. I mean, as good as I can be. Still eating, well fed. I'm working remotely, so I'm lucky enough to still have my job, and I've had plenty of time to read my very long reading list that I have been hanging over my head for a long time. So I'm happy to have some time to work on that. Writing some more. I'm on Twitter a lot. So overall, I've been good. How about you?
I've been pretty good too. I've noticed maybe a fluctuation in my emotions where sometimes everything just seems so normal. I have to pinch myself to realize what's going on. I think because to some extent, I'm in the metropolitan New York City area where there's a fair amount of spillover. And it's really the first time in my life where I've noticed any kind of, I'd say, a local xenophobia, where I've been to places where the Kurds don't trust the Arabs don't trust the Jews, no one trusts the British. That I'm used to, right? What I'm not used to is people saying, you're from Stanford? I don't know about that. I think if you conducted survey research of people in my town and asked them, would you be comfortable with people who live in New York City coming to a day trip in your town? I think the vast majority of people would say no.
I think that's absolutely valid. I mean, we saw that very same dynamic evolve in China when this outbreak first arose there. There were ample examples of individual neighborhoods and districts cutting off access to any outsiders. We saw, examples and photos of old communist cotters sitting outside their neighborhood with a large banner saying, no outsiders allowed. I think it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate, but it is, I think, at some level, a sort of innate human reaction to these sorts of events.
You have two roommates, girlfriend with whom you live.
Mm-hmm.
Are you feeling any sense of claustrophobia?
No, actually, I think I've enjoyed having some more company. I think if it was just Sabina and I, we would be at each other's throats more. But thankfully, it's nice that we have a larger space that can accommodate two more people, and having other folks to go and chat with and socialize with what we're feeling like we just need some way to decompress or complain about something. It's really wonderful, and I think it's way better than I think if we had just been stuck alone. I love Sabina. And I love living with her, and I absolutely love our home here. But I think being cooped up with a single person at all for this long would create tension. So it's nice to have some other folks to just spend time with when we need it.
It's something that we don't really put a lot of thought into, but the idea of spending a prolonged amount of time with people we love,
mm-hmm.
I mean, it can be disorienting to say the least.
Yes.
Now, with your roommates, are you starting to discover, and I'm including Sabina in this,
mm-hmm.
Are you starting to discover anything about them, any traits about them, maybe values that you weren't really aware that they were there? Not necessarily negative, but things that have been brought to the forefront just by the necessity of spending time together.
Yeah, I guess I think I realized just how similar some of my sense of humor is with one of my roommates, Bart, and for my other roommate, Chris. I think I hadn't really appreciated just how much time he spends working for his employer. I knew that he used to come home quite later than the rest of us when we were going into the office, but I had no idea just how long and how committed he was to his job. I mean, some nights he's working until 7, 8, 9, 10 p.m. So it's a different appreciation for just how committed he is to his work. My other roommate, who I mentioned before, Bart, he has not had as much to do. His employer didn't have a whole lot that he could do from home, so it's a little bit of a different dynamic.
I think to have a job in this climate is a blessing.
Yeah.
Be fortunate with what you have and don't squander it. I'm also starting to grow an appreciation, more of an admiration for certain professions I'd never really thought of. Grocery store workers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those are the obvious ones, truckers, nurses. Are there any professions that you really haven't thought of before that now you're taking a second look at and you're thinking, wow, I probably undervalued this person?
I definitely agree with you on grocery store workers for sure. I have a Giant that's not too far from me that I shop at. I had a question about where I could find a particular food item, and I as I approached this worker at the grocery store, I couldn't help but feel this sense of gratitude, this sense of realization about how ignorant I had been about what this person's life must be like these days. Having to go into this grocery store every single day where hundreds of people pass through and worrying that you're going to become sick yourself. Now, a lot of them are thankfully younger, but they're not teenagers either. They're certainly somewhat at risk, I'd say, of infection and possibly serious symptoms. So I salute them, and I think the other category of folks I think about a lot now are actually the folks who are unemployed, the folks whose jobs we took for granted, and whose labor we took for granted before. All the folks who work in various restaurants and bars who are now unemployed or have been laid off. It's really unfortunate. It's really tragic. I mean, there are some estimates that unemployment may reach 20% or may have already reached 20% by the time of this recording. And I think that's really that's really humbling. It's really saddening. So I really hope that they're able to recover soon.
This is a moment that I've been excited for quite some time. The opportunity to get you in trouble with people you work with. So you told me a quote a while ago, not that there are no atheists in foxholes, but everyone's a Keynesian in a foxhole.
Absolutely.
The belief in government stimulus to fuel the economy, to rebirth to the economy. This is something I feel pretty strongly about. I think to some extent we're on the same page about free markets. I'm a capitalist at heart. I believe in competition and free enterprise. But 2008 rolled around and we saw a large potential collapse of our economy if the Obama administration wasn't willing to conduct a fair amount of bailouts. It seems like we're facing something to that again. I have to give Barack Obama and his administration a lot of credit. This was something I was in support of at the time. I'm a big believer in letting people fail, unless letting people fail leads them to die. I don't want to see a collapse of our economy.
Right.
Are you a Keynesian in a foxhole right now?
Oh, wow. I think at some level, I've always been a Keynesian, but only when it comes to, but here's the thing. Keynesianism for the sake of Keynesianism is not a policy. And it's certainly not one that I don't think Keynes would have advocated for. I think when I say everyone's a Keynesian in a foxhole, what I mean is that I think even if you had Friedrich Hayek in the White House right now, given all the political pressure from businesses, big and small, and from unemployed workers, he would have no choice, given all that political pressure, to cave into some sort of government stimulus. There is just simply an immense amount of pressure on any political actor right now to try and stave off what could be a very terrible crisis in the medium term, and a lot of the short-term pain that businesses and employees are feeling. I think ultimately, though, what matters more than any of that is how well this money is distributed. And I don't just mean in terms of administration, how it's actually administered and how efficiently, but I mean how this money is targeted. I don't have any problem with government spending if it's going into what's going to be a highly productive asset. If it's infrastructure, it could be infrastructure. It could be the creation of some sort of new financial tool for the IRS to be able to directly pad people's bank accounts when necessary, like in these sorts of crises. I mean, that's spending that's worth spending. There's some spending that's not worth spending, and that's a bit trickier. And in the end, it's a highly political process. So I don't think it's likely that most of the spending that's going to occur in the next few months or the next year is going to be particularly productive, but it's going to be politically expedient, given the circumstances and the fact that there's an election in November.
Now, this reminds me of something. During the Blitzkrieg, Keynes and Hayek were both in academia at the time, in the United Kingdom, and a large portion of academia went up to the Oxbridge communities to continue teaching and doing their research there. And one of the responsibilities of people in the community was to be on alert for incoming German bombers. And at one point, Hayek and Keynes were on the same watch team. They were a watch pair together, which I think is one of the conversations in history with which I have the greatest amount of curiosity. I would like to offer a $50 prize right now to a person who makes a good short story about addressing the coronavirus today as though they were on a watch team for people who aren't wearing masks. That's my 2 pages, $50. I think it could be a fun plan.
I think that'd be wonderful, and I would love to read it. So I look forward to reading the submissions.
Thank you so much for joining us, Evan. I really appreciate it. Evan with the American Enterprise Institute. Thank you so much.